Welcome back. This week the students get the front spindles and the rear axles out of that Isuzu project. We do the secondary cylinders on the Clark forklift, and we'll see if they're getting any closer to getting the engine back in this road. Hope you enjoy.
Students are loosening the ball joints to get the spindle out of the way so we can work on the half shaft and replace the ball joints. We're using an air chisel to loosen both of the upper ball joints. The lower ball joints required some heat.
Ready?
Here the students are removing both rear axles so they can get the third member out, but also because we're going to be replacing the rear axle bearings as well as the seals. With the axles out of the way, the students can remove the differential and take care of that leak.
We're running a tap through all the holes in the differential to chase the threads. Since this uses sealer to seal the third member instead of a gasket, a lot of the sealer gets down into the threads, and that can actually affect the torque. When we go to torque this back together, it could actually leak. So we want to make sure that the holes are all cleaned up. We're going to do the same thing with the bolts that go in them, and then that way when we torque it down, it'll be just what the manufacturer recommended.
The third member doesn't use a gasket, it uses a special sealer, so we're applying a 3/8 thick bead of sealer around the differential before putting the third member back in and torquing it into place. This is the original engine out of the Nissan Rogue, and this is the replacement engine. The students have just about got everything transferred over and it's about ready to go back into the car.
I'm lining up the torque converter with the flex plate to put the engine and transaxle back together.
We're cleaning the exhaust mounting surface on the head.
Using chemical to clean it, we don't want to use any abrasives on the aluminum surface. On the exhaust manifold, we can use an abrasive wheel. Put on a new gasket, put the manifold on the head, and then torque it into place. With the main mass cylinder rebuilt, the students are now taking out the two secondary cylinders to rebuild them. You can see we had to get a little bit creative in holding up the mast to do the secondary cylinders. We've got this big piece of box tubing sitting on top of the cage, held on by a strap, and then up there we've got some weights wedged in between the box and holding up part of the mast enough just so we could get the tubes out. I'm just going to pull the hose down. Getting these cylinders out was a bit of a chore, but the students did a great job with it. You're the man is what I said. Well, you're the second man. Just like with the main cylinder we did a couple of weeks ago, we're using an air chisel to break the caps loose. Then the caps come off and they can take the piston out of the cylinders.
Help me open this thing. Watch it.
cylinders cleaned out and the new guides in place, we put both of them back together. With the pistons back in the cylinders, the students get busy tearing the old seals out of the caps. What's left of them anyway. As with the other two cylinders, we're going to make sure that the opening is facing down in the cap, so when the hydraulic pressure hits it, it will expand inward and compress around the piston much tighter to keep it from leaking. So we're going to take and get this started in like this to get it into the groove, and then start feeding it around, getting it pushed into the groove itself. And when we get to the end of it, it gets a little trickier. And getting it fed into the hole so we don't damage the actual lip itself. But I am going to use my thumbs to push here. Probably can't see that, but I'm going to as gently as I can. I should not be using metal here. You should use plastic to push on it, but I'm going to be pretty careful. I've done the other two. Get that popped into the back side and pushed in. And once we get the whole seal in, and we'll run our finger around it to make sure that it's tight inside the housing. And then we can get it all put back together. There we go. And so that's in. You can see we got the seal in here. It's looking really good. And we're going to replace the O-ring here on the bottom side. We'll put our new wiper seal in. Then this will be ready to go back together. We don't have the correct seal driver for this seal. We're using a spanner socket to press it into place. We're using a feeler gauge to wedge in between the seal and the piston so we can ease the seal around there without doing any damage. Now the caps can go back into place. Now they're ready to go back into the machine.
Bottom, one over there. So get this. They have to be the exact same way. You got it? Yes.
Lift it up, you gotta lift it up.
Lift it towards you.
Alright, you're in.
Putting new O-rings in the line, they have to go into the housing up in here, so I've got some grease there to put up into that recess, and the grease should hold it in place for us. Oops. It should keep it in place long enough to get the line on. That'll keep us centered. We'll wiggle the line a little bit, get the threads started, and we're there. What we do now, I'm just take and tighten this line up. That takes care of this side. Next time on Bulldog Builds, students will have the Rogue engine back in and be putting up the cradle. We'll see if we can get some ball joints put in on our Isuzu Trooper project. And a vehicle drives in needing a high pressure fuel pump, but we'll explain to you why we need to replace it and what was going on with it. See you next week.